So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Tuesday night Nata Yoga Samadhi session. We're still at the Hermitage and trying to figure out what we're going to do with our live gatherings. Still haven't come up with a plan yet for next week. More on that later. But continuing to meet live stream here from the Hermitage. And we started a little bit early with the actual live stream to see if we could work out the glitches that inevitably happen and did before the 6:30 sign-in came up. So I just wanted to be here and ready to go when people started signing in. So we're still working on that one. We were just sitting here, Luang Por and I were sitting here quietly for 10 minutes or so, and somebody tuned in and asked the question, "Are we meditating?" Not quite sure what was happening, and my thought was, yes, we should always be meditating. Luang Por, Luang Por Cha, would often answer people's question of like their comment of, "Gee, I don't have time to meditate," and he would answer that with a question of, "Well, do you have time to breathe?" So every time we're breathing, every time we're living, every time we're doing anything, we can make that a meditation. So yes, we're meditating, or we should be, or trying to just be simply alert and aware of what we're doing in this moment. And that's a part of the process of meditation. So in a more formal sense, we'll begin this evening with a bit of guided meditation to settle and maybe meditate for a half an hour or so in the formal sitting position. So finding a comfortable position to be in with moving as little as possible for the next half an hour or so, trying to settle the body down into a reasonably comfortable position such that it can be held relatively still without slumping, without getting drowsy through poor posture, maintaining a sense of uprightness and alertness, but avoiding a holding of tension, particularly in the back and the neck and the shoulders and the face, trying to let those all unwind a bit, but in a way that it isn't conducive to just nodding off. And then finding comfortable enough, because the body's never going to be completely comfortable. It just doesn't work that way. But enough so that you don't have to kind of constantly shift and move around, and can hold relatively still. And holding a still body without too much fidgeting and moving around helps to create a still mind as well. So just find that balance over the next couple of minutes as the formal meditation starts. Tuning into the sensations of the body from the tip of the head down to the soles of the feet, in whatever sitting position you're in. Just being aware of and experiencing the entire body. Noticing if there's any holding or tension in the face, the forehead, around the eyes, around the mouth or the jaw, and just consciously allowing those to settle and relax. and downwards through the whole body. Shoulders, great place to hold tension. Just allow the shoulders to relax, drop, chest to open, abdomen to open. Letting the sit bones and legs form a firm foundation to the ground or your feet. And then broaden the awareness to the whole body. And then when the time is right, just tuning into the breathing, the gentle rhythm. When you're grounded and somewhat relaxed, just note gentle rhythm, in and out breathing. Slowly expanding and slowly relaxing, releasing, energizing with the in-breath, releasing, relaxing with the out-breath, swelling and subsiding. And allow that gentle rhythmic quality, whole body, let that just gently permeate, suffuse, and let it wash through your awareness. And just be with that over and over again over the next bit of time. So if people want to take a moment to just stretch before we begin the evening reflection, give that time to do that. It needs to be held longer to turn it on. Okay. Welcome again, everybody, and to those who have joined in the past half hour. I'm visualizing everybody having finished their stretching and sitting back down. Hard to imagine what a virtual audience is doing, but that's what I'm thinking. So offer a few reflections this evening, and then segue into a little bit of time for some questions, answers. I was thinking earlier, one of my favorite things to do is to get rid of clutter, get rid of stuff. I've always been kind of a rather than a creator or a maintainer, I've been inclined towards being a destroyer. If you're looking at the pantheon of gods in like the Hindu tradition, the creator, the maintainer, the destroyer, Shiva, the destroyer. And I've always enjoyed getting rid of stuff and cleaning up and going through old document files and getting rid of stuff that I don't need, and same with things that I've accumulated in my life, material things, just going through and thinning out, parsing down, because it we accumulate so much clutter, so much stuff in our lives. So much of our lives are spent just acquiring things, and coming into possession of things, not just material things, obviously, but also our inner world. Our inner world of uh, mental activities and thoughts and emotions and ideas and all those kinds of things, and then also our social world, different people and activities, different all sorts of different angles where we spend a lot of time accumulating, uh, and sometimes we find it much harder to let go and uh, get rid of some of the things that are no longer serving a useful purpose internally or externally. So I think a lot of Dhamma practice is just working on cleaning house, getting rid of the clutter um, in our lives. One of the topics that Luang Por was talking about in one of the recent sessions that we've been having is the various forms of dukkha, and one of those three kinds in that particular categorization was the dukkha of compounded things or constructions or fabrications or formations, sankhara dukkha. And I kind of think of that. I mean, it's very broad, of course. It just means the inherent unsatisfactoriness of anything really involved in formations, creations, fabrications, essentially our created world, the inherent instability and unsatisfactoriness of that. And just kind of reflecting on the whole nature of what it takes to maintain existence, to maintain ourselves in a world of constantly recreating our experience, recreating the world around us, because it is constantly changing. Everything that we set out to bring into our lives, to create, to bring forth, does have this nature to change. It has this nature to eventually pass away and move on. And that's really disturbing to us. It upsets our wish for and sense of stability. So we get involved in this constant process of recreating or starting up something new, just to keep maintaining our existence. It's just this process of having to keep propping up our world, to give some sense of organization and stability to it. And that maintaining that constant recreation of the world, the world of our experience, uh, is tiring. It can get very exhausting, really. And in fact, that's what we pretty much do from the moment we wake up, going through our day, uh, kind of involved in this process of always seeking, creating, propping up, maintaining that which is constantly in flux, constantly in change, constantly arising and passing away through its own natural conditions. So we're always trying to buck that natural law of arising and ceasing by not being able to tolerate that cessation and that moment where things come to a rest, before it brings up a sense of kind of anxiety or restlessness, to move on to something new, create something new. We pretty much do that until we get really exhausted, and have to kind of move into a state of kind of suspended animation and sleep where we can take a break from it, even though oftentimes in our sleep and in our dreams we're still involved with that at some level. But maybe it's sometimes a little bit of a break of it. That's our kind of annihilation tendencies. It's like we're involved with bhava tanha most of the day, the becoming, the craving to become, the craving to exist, the craving to experience. And we get so tired of it because it takes so much energy to prop up that process that we collapse and kind of move into a bit of vibhava tanha, the tendency to want to just not experience, to not have to exist, to not get involved with that. And then we wake up and start over again. So a lot of, Dhamma practice is, I think, starting to examine that and look at that and see how we can modulate that to bring ourselves a bit more rest and sanity and clarity, and not getting involved in those habitual uh, habits that bring us that kind of sankhara dukkha, that dukkha of being constantly involved and enmeshed in the creations of our world. A couple weeks ago, I think I was talking about sort of the underlying tendencies that control most of how we react and live in the world, the anusaya of essentially greed, hatred, and delusion, and with some permutations and combinations of factors that go along with that. And also pointing out that, those are what often drive our lives, inform our actions of body, speech, and mind, and that we can start to try and substitute more skillful, if you will, underlying tendencies. They're not classified as such, but the paramis, the perfections, the qualities that we can develop actively to help us cross over the flood of samsara, the flood of sankharas that cause the dukkha, and substituting these skillful qualities little by little, so that they start to take center stage over the anusaya, the usual tendencies that control our lives. And I think Luang Por and myself have both spent a fair amount of time talking about the paramis of dana and sila, generosity, giving, and virtue, morality, if you will, skillfulness, non-harmfulness in our actions and in our speech, and giving up, giving over, giving to, as wonderful bases for helping us to cross over the floods. And then one that I thought I'd just mention a little bit more about tonight is another one of the paramis in the Pali, nekama, often translated as renunciation, which has a strong connotation for many of us of renunciation, sort of like giving up anything fun and interesting in the world, and giving up the enjoyment of life, and kind of closing the iron gates, locking ourselves behind them in some prison. It's called a monastery in our case, or whatever your image is, but something that doesn't have a real pleasant connotation to it. So it's better sometimes, in my mind, to use a translation like simplicity, and to start examining how we can, maybe start cleaning out the clutter of our lives through relinquishing, through giving up, through this nekama parami, simplification of our lives. There's lots of ways to think about doing that, just to create more space, breathing room, and along the material lines, just the acquisition of stuff, and do we really need all the different material trappings that we can get into our lives, trying to keep things as simple as possible. And all these things take maintenance, and again, more propping up. The more you have, the more it breaks, the more you have to fix it, the more you have to maintain it. Here in the monastery, we're not exempt from that. We've got constant technological dukkha with different cameras and microphones and all of that we're even using right now, and these all take maintenance. And so we're aware of that. We're trying to use these tools, as everybody is using tools for a good towards a good purpose. But watching that inclination to do it just a little bit better, or just to have it a little bit more smooth, or if I just had this piece of equipment, or this new computer, or this new iPhone, this update, then it would be just a little bit better. And just watching the force of the mind that keeps on moving in that direction, that doesn't allow itself to just settle and be content. So this simplification parami, nekama parami, when practiced like on the material level, brings us a greater sense of contentment. Just appreciating what it is that we have, being able to let go of the need to, you know, create a little more happiness on the margin, just a little bit more marginal happiness. Do we really need that? See if we can simplify simplify our lives and what we have to deal with and manage in the material realm. Also in the realm of, you know, social relationships. Uh, Spent a fair amount of time recently talking with lots of people about dealing with difficult uh, associates, people in our lives, friends, relatives, all the people that we encounter, and as Luang Por often refers to in the Mangala Sutta, one of the first of the highest blessings is not associating with fools, um, associating with the wise. And how do we incorporate that into our lives? How do we make that manifest? Certainly we can't just completely dump everybody we don't like or that's causing us momentary grief. But looking at how we, through all sorts of various reasons, uh, kind of tend to hang on to relationships or associations with people that aren't really serving a good purpose. We accumulate people in our lives sometimes, and um, even when they may be causing us harm or when they may be reinforcing unskillful habits of ours, uh, not supporting skillful habits or our spiritual practice. Um, Yet, through some sense of obligation or through fear, or just momentum, habit, um, wondering what the right thing to do is with people who aren't being helpful in our lives, for whatever underlying psychological motivation, we still find ourselves in association. So looking at that and asking ourselves, taking a look at the long run, what is it that will serve the purpose both for the good of myself and for the good of others in the long run, in terms of our social relationships. And sometimes we have to gently relinquish and simplify and let the ones that aren't being useful or helpful, let them slowly, um, fade out as we move towards being with people who are going to be in our camp, so to speak, of particularly if they're supportive of our spiritual inclinations and developing goodness and peace in our lives and in the lives of others. That's who we want to associate with. So simplifying our relationships in the world without abandoning, certain obligations that come, certain karmic obligations, like, raising a child or taking care of a parent or things like that. We have to be careful how we interpret that, but just to keep that in mind, and how to use relationships in a way that leads to non-complication, leads to non-compounding, um, and even in the relationships that we are keeping, that we want to keep, how to simplify uh, our expectations of them, and to more and more gradually move into just using them as vehicles for developing kindness and compassion in a broad sense, and as much as possible, letting go of the attachment that comes in some relationships. The attachment isn't, you know, other than the attachment that's needed for a child with a parent in terms of their psychological development, that kind of thing is probably a useful temporary form of attachment, but more thinking more along the lines of expectations of people in our relationships, how we try and get something in our relationships from somebody else, even on a subtle level, uh, like like depending on somebody else's propping us up with praise and support, even in subtle ways, how that can happen in more intimate relationships, and learning to just broaden broaden that, let go of the attachment aspects, the expectation, and then just using it as a vehicle for developing more um, space, more broad, boundless qualities that are transmissible to all beings, not just to a single being in our lives in an intimate relationship or the family members around us. Um, so that, you know, experimenting with how to simplify and keep the relationships that are good, a few good relationships, a few good friendships in our lives is so much more valuable than lots of people, some of whom are not such good influences. So kind of, so it might sound a little coarse, but kind of cleaning out the clutter of our of our relationships. And then in our mental world, you know, I think we all experience the mental uh, clutter that's constantly reiterating itself over and over again, and just learning how to slow that down too, and maybe beginning with watching that sense of agitation and restlessness that keeps us moving constantly as soon as one event or one experience is starting to follow its natural course and dying out, how that restlessness or that uh, um, kind of agitation, even on a subtle level, starts to well up as we immediately try to move on to something else to keep the samsaric experience going on, to try and prop up this sense of continuity of always fresh becoming, as in one of our chants in uh, uh, the first sutta, the first training, the Dhammacakka Sutta. There's one phrase that's talking about the experience of uh, creating, of craving. It's like uh, uh, um, ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there. Is the way that it's phrased in that sutta. Ever seeking fresh delight. So just watching that mind that's just constantly in motion, constantly moving towards creating something new, and not letting ourselves just rest and relax. There's absolutely nothing wrong and a lot to be gained from letting the flow of experience pause and stop and rest. And when you do that with clarity and alertness, the space just sort of really opens up. Um, and that's a form of renunciation. That's giving up that constant motion of mind. That's a form of simplification. So finding ways to reflect on that and bring that into our lives, we have to consciously do it, because the automatic tendency is just to keep on rolling on, um, and we have to wake up and start to see if there's ways that we can start to actually enjoy our lives a little more, rather than just constantly being in motion. Um, One of the nice things in traditional Buddhist countries, particularly say like in Northeast Thailand, where our tradition comes from, is this experience of the Uposatha observance days, which are done in some places every week on the lunar quarters, and some places twice a month on the full moon, the new moons, where people in the community just take a day and say, okay, this is a day where I'm going to set aside one day a week or one day every 2 weeks, set aside the normal flow of life and try and tap in and slow down and maybe experience a little bit of extra renunciation or simplicity. Go to the monastery, the local monastery, and take on the 8 precepts, which are the 5 precepts, but enhanced with a few more that help with that simplification. And it mostly follows along the lines of trying to experience life, on a simpler level, taking on not eating so much. Eating and entertainment are 2 big things that we seek enjoyment with, and they can be fun and enjoyable, and certainly not particularly harmful in a moral way in any way, but they kind of perpetuate that movement of mind, always seeking fresh delight, now here, now there, and to kind of just moving back more in towards set aside that outward going mind for entertainment or fun, um, those kinds of things, and simplify our food activities to just 1 or 2 meals in the morning, and then just devote ourselves the rest of the day towards being quiet, reflecting on Dhamma, and committing ourselves to that decluttering our lives for a day, and just allowing that space to open up and see what that brings. See if that brings a sense of that. What it should do is bring a sense of more contentment and peace. So working it in somehow to your own life, it doesn't have to be on those particular days, but working it in on a periodic basis to just step back from the flow, um, and take on some of those renunciate precepts of eating less, talking less, engaging less, practicing meditation more, just reflecting, and decreasing the stimulation in our lives. It's a really skillful thing to do. And all of this kind of letting go or relinquishment, renunciation in these realms of materialism, social activities, the internal movements seeking stimulation, all of these kinds of uh, activities that we call, nekama parami renunciation. They're really forms of the overall quality of relinquishment, of letting go, and serve as a very tangible basis for the greater kind of letting go and relinquishment that can happen as we develop our insights and our wisdom into the nature of existence and the world around us, and how we keep creating tension and stress and dukkha in our lives, and how to unwind, and when we truly see through more peacefulness and clarity the ways that we keep that rolling, then we have this natural tendency towards disenchantment, not being fooled by it anymore, not wanting to be driven by it anymore. And there's just a natural sense of breathing out, of relinquishing, of letting go, of not jumping on the train over and over again. But the nekama parami is a really good, tangible way to really focus that process and learn that skill so that it can be applied at deeper levels of the mind when the time comes for that. So I think I'll just leave that as a few reflections for this evening, and we can open it up to questions as they come up. I think I need to reach over to that in some way, or get that screen a little closer so I can scroll up and down on the questions. Okay. Let's see. Looks like there's a lot of activity here. Okay. Just gonna do a quick survey through here. Okay, well, let's start at the top.
Gets further up.
Even further up. Oh, okay, here's the first one. Is there one before that? I guess not. Okay, let's see. I have family members who have been professionally diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, and then continued PhD psychologists have recommended having little to no contact with them. Could you share some reflections on how to interact with family members who cause serious harm? Thank you. Well, that kind of fits into the topic that we were just talking about being careful with who we are associating with, and the time we spend with people who are causing harm. And a lot of it is your capacity as an individual to be with them, if you need to be with them, when you need to be with them, to be able to hold that in a way that is kind and compassionate, but doesn't buy into it, doesn't feed it, and doesn't shake you off of your center of gravity, your basis of clarity. So you have to just know yourself about how much contact you can do with people who do cause harm. It's hard to give any kind of blanket answer other than watching your own mind state. And if you find that you're by being with them a certain amount, or interacting with them, or trying to engage with them in some way, if that's creating not just unpleasant mind states, but unskillful mind states, such that you're reacting in ways that you regret later on, whether it's in how you respond to them, or the internal dukkha that it causes for yourself or for the people around you, then you have to let that be the gauge. Certainly, if you're strong enough in those relationships and in your own internal environment that you can be with certain people, as much as is necessary to fulfill certain obligations, and you can do that with, without getting hooked, then that might be useful, just to do that, and be with them, and just through example, demonstrate a different way of being, without trying to convince anybody, or do therapy with anybody or anything like that, but just through example, demonstrating kindness and equanimity. But at any point that becomes overwhelming and you lose that balance and that base, and start moving into reactivity or unskillfulness, or you can't let it go for nights and days, then that's a time to set boundaries, set limits, politely withdraw, and realize that people have their karma. That's that develop that sense of equanimity without being judgmental or dismissive, but knowing what your capacity is, and that's actually practicing kindness and compassion. Also, using allowing that space to happen through withdrawal and not reinforcing, dependent on what your individual capability is. So that's my thoughts anyway. Paul, any other comments to add to that?
No, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on to a more slightly different topic. Dear Ajahn, are monks allowed to accept and use scented things offered by laypersons, although they are not supposed to use scented things on their own? We just sort of take that one as it comes. Sometimes it's hard to get like soaps and that kind of thing without scents in them, and try not to make ourselves too much of a pain, so that if somebody offers us some soap that has scent in it and we don't have any other soap to use that's unscented, then we don't make too big a deal about it. But certainly if people ask us and want what we do, we say, yeah, it's one of the training rules is to try and just use neutral kinds of things to keep ourselves clean. So, but we try and not be too much of a difficult around those kinds of things. We certainly wouldn't use perfumes or things that are just for that reason. There's no hygienic need for them. Next question. While creating a pulsed, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. A doctor asked me without what I would not find worth living. The question made no sense to me. I'm not quite sure exactly if I'm reading that wrong or without what.
Without what I would not find life worth living. So what would you be? What would you be? Say deprived of in your life that would make life not worth living. Something like that.
And then she follows with, I don't know what life is worth. I don't know that life is worth living or not worth living. Though very common, those seem intellectual concepts. Life is, and we can make the most of it, but can we judge when it's worth living? And I see it's sort of like trying to find out at what point, I think I'm getting the gist of this. At what point in, say, a life-threatening illness or life, an illness that's moving towards the end of life, at what point does it would one value or one say, okay, it's just not worth going on anymore here. There's this it's not worth the effort. It's not worth the pain or the suffering of the physical body deteriorating or the mind deteriorating. So it's sort of like, I think they're probably trying to get a sense of at what point you would not want to have life-sustaining measures. Whether it's sort of like, well, I can't eat, so I don't want to be artificially fed, or my mind is going, so, at what point do I stop, asking for supports? So trying to get maybe somebody to get yourself to reflect on, at what point to stop pushing the life-sustaining processes that might seem extraneous or not extraneous, but forced, I guess, in any way. So it is a kind of an intellectual concept, and it's hard for people to know, at what point is life not worth living. I don't think that I don't ask that question of myself so much as kind of reflecting on it more on a, honoring the natural process of the body and its deterioration when that time comes. Certainly, as a Buddhist monastic, the encouragement is to just reflect on the naturalness of a deteriorating mind, a deteriorating body, and there's there's going to be pain involved. There's going to be unpleasantness involved as you go along. And, at some point, I think that when that becomes, it becomes very hard to sustain what it takes to keep life going. Like if every time you eat, you get nauseated, well, there's something that your body is saying there, and if it feels more comfortable not to eat than to be nauseated, then, you kind of, that's a point where, you start to relinquish. So it's not so much making a value judgment on the whole, is life worth living or is it not worth living, but sort of like kind of going along step by step as to what seems like it's a natural tendency, and allowing the body to just naturally go its way, follow its course, even in the period of deterioration. And supporting ourselves in whatever way we can to keep ourselves comfortable. Certainly using the medicines that are available for comfort measures, pain medicine, that kind of thing. We're not here to have an endurance test and survive any possible excruciating situations as a test of ourselves in any way. But we start in our training and our teaching, it's sort of to let that naturalness of life take its course until the life force just peters out and it's time to relinquish this particular physical form, just because it really can't sustain itself under reasonable conditions any longer. So yeah, it's not a kind of a judgment that we have to make based on suppositions or conceptualizations or theoretical possibilities, but to just take as we go along, because we have absolutely no idea how you're going to die. We don't know how we're going to die. Everybody wants the perfect death of falling asleep one night and just not waking up, or walking out into the woods, sitting under a tree and fading out. Those are few and far between. But so we really don't know when we're going to die or how we're going to die, but we take it step by step and go with what feels like a natural inclination as best we can.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it is.
That's what it is. Let's see. Ajahns, if we go into sensual indulgences, knowing that the satisfaction is fleeting, can we consciously avoid a cycle of dissatisfaction, being content only in a moment of enjoyment?
Good luck.
That's the blunt answer. I was trying to think of something smoother to say. But yeah, good luck. Because so I remember a time when, this is well before I was a monk, when I was attending Ajahn Amaro at a visit to the Bay Area, and we were talking about sensuality and life's experiences and dukkha, the fleetingness of sensuality, and the fact that it always deteriorates, and all that kind of stuff, all that good monastic stuff that Ajahn Amaro was trying to implant in my brain. And I was a bit resistant. And I just said, well, I know what I'm getting into when I, go into this realm of, sensual pleasure or good, entering into a relationship or blah, 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 blah. And I said, and I know it causes dukkha. I know it's not going to be satisfactory in the end, that it's going to end, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. And I remember the look on his face. And it was just sort of like this look of, you poor sucker. there's you're just open the door to a lot of suffering if you hold on to that. I wasn't ready to acknowledge the truth of that at that point in time, but I clearly saw it in his face, and I clearly knew what he was thinking, and it made an impression, that has lasted. So, I think it's important to realize that, that there are a number of things, hopefully, in life that are pleasurable, that are enjoyable, things that we do just as part of living, like eating. We don't purposefully try and eat, rancid food or unpleasant kinds of things. When we do something like have a good meal and it tastes good, then there is that pleasure and that enjoyment. And we try not to enter into attachment or expectation that that's always going to be the case. And it is fleeting. But actually purposefully entering into any kind of sensual experience just for experiencing only the pleasurable aspect of it. Again, it's not a moral issue. It's not something like that's going to cause, harm to somebody else necessarily, unless it breaks the precepts. But it does set up the stage for disappointment because, as you've heard a million times, these are all fleeting kinds of forms of satisfaction. So, if you choose to follow that urge just for the sake of a pleasurable experience, then you're setting the stage. Well, it is going to end, it is going to change. And that momentum of mind towards pleasure seeking doesn't stop there. The pleasant experience stops, but the momentum, then there's this, this moment of gratification while you're getting what you want. And then it ends. And it's a very rare person who will do that without any kind of, setting a stage for that momentum of mind towards something pleasurable to pick up and try and find its way and manifest in some other form of seeking of pleasure. So maybe there's a slight delay in the process, but as long as you reinforce just a pure pleasure-seeking kind of mind, it's just reinforcing that mental habit. You're not going anywhere towards, letting go of that kind of mental habit. And the peace or the peace of mind that one experiences, dependent or the happiness that one experiences dependent on sensual gratification. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's again, it's just that it the peace of mind comes in the ending of the desire. Now you've ended the desire by getting gratification, and there's a certain peace that comes through the ending of that moment of desire, but it's not the kind of peace that's long lasting. It's dependent on gratification of that desire, and it's very fleeting. And a higher form of experiencing peace is developing the mind that doesn't have that desire to begin with. If you've cultivated a state of mind or a way of being in the world that isn't constantly seeking pleasure just for pleasure's sake, then that craving doesn't arise, and the need to gratify that craving doesn't arise, and the ending of that craving doesn't arise. It just doesn't arise. And that is really peaceful. That's like having the peace of non-craving all the time, rather than waiting to have to gratify something to have a very quick moment of peacefulness, the peacefulness of not wanting. So it just kind of depends on, how much peace and happiness you want, if you're, and just realizing that the indulgence in it for that particular reason keeps on going on, then that's just what you keep on getting until you can kind of avoid the whole cycle altogether.
Yeah, I think it's also important because oftentimes the assumption is that I need, I'm not I'm not going to get the gratification of sense desire. So, and in order to accomplish that, I have to get rid of my desires, and I have to kind of almost like squelch those desires, so that I don't have those desires. But it's more like, it's like being able to taste the flavor of the happiness that comes from, um, uh, that not seeking of gratification. Start realizing, oh, that is actually more satisfying.
Yeah.
And
Deeper, long lasting.
it's deeper, more long lasting. It is not second class.
Absolutely. First class. Good. Okay, for I jumped too far. For Nekama Parami, where is that? Ooh, got a lot of questions there. Oh, there we go. For Nekama Parami, can we keep 8 precepts at home, or do we have to stay at the monastery? Thank you. You're welcome. You can keep them at home. If you don't have a monastery to go to, do it at home. Yeah, you have to go for wherever you're at. Sometimes going to the monastery, if there's one that's nearby and they have this, fortnightly, or weekly practice of 8 precepts, then having the support of people around you is great. Go for it. If you don't have that capability, that possibility, then make that determination as best you can at your own home. Gather a few friends around. If you've got some other people who are interested, meet together in your house or somebody else's house, or go and spend the day out in the forest somewhere, bring a picnic lunch, don't eat in the afternoon, meditate, talk Dhamma, whatever. Any way you can make it happen. Ajahn Sona recently talked about equanimity and compassion, 2 of our Brahma Viharas. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how to apply that to parenting. My child gets into papancha loops, I think, that are really difficult. Well, yeah, that's the equanimity and compassion of parenting. It's a special training that you have, a special opportunity to develop those qualities. Because children are just developing, and they don't have the reflective capacity, depending on how old your child is. If your child's 30, then you might have a tougher job of it. But assuming that your child is a younger child, then you just have to realize that they're developing their capacities still, and that spinning out is a very common occurrence in childhood, and your job is to help them, help to set boundaries for them, because they're not really able to set their own boundaries yet, and to set boundaries that aren't too tight too, because children need a lot of space, but tight enough so that they don't, create a lot of harm or develop bad habits. You want to kind of gently contain them with boundaries that are appropriate, but gentle and spacious within the boundary itself that needs to be set. And that's where the compassion for that. I mean, you can watch a kid who wants something, and just see the desire mind, the constant seeking. It's like, it's really a very good expression of how we're probably feeling inside ourselves, but we've developed a little more control over it. So it's that same kind of, constant wanting, constant motion, constant wanting to get something that's fun or pleasurable or not painful. Um, and compassion for the dukkha that's involved in not getting what you want. There's a lot of kids' lives is trying to get what they want and being unhappy when they don't get what they want, and just realizing that that's suffering, and sometimes it's unavoidable. Just gosh, part of growing up, and needs the compassion and understanding, and also the equanimity, that you know uh, even in child's life, it's very hard for them to understand that there is pain, there is pleasure, and that the world revolves around seeking one and trying to avoid the other. They don't have quite that ability to understand that yet, but if the more you have of that, spaciousness and equanimity, the more they will pick up on that in subtle ways as they grow up. The more you can demonstrate those and experience those and live those, even if you can't teach it to somebody that young, that's how they learn. That's how they pick up. That's how they mature and develop, is by modeling after you. So you have to be careful about how you express that, and then keep on working on your own equanimity and compassion.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part, is that children, you can tell them all sorts of things, but it's what they see, what they experience, what they absorb from the examples around them that is really important.
Okay. Thank yous and comments. Thank you, Ajahns, for sharing your wisdom with us. In my practice, I've recently been experiencing sort of stable drowsiness. Doesn't lead to sleep, but makes it more difficult to catch distractions. Yeah, stable drowsiness, sort of that kind of, I think the Tibetans call it subtle laxity.
Subtle laxity.
Subtle laxity. It's not out and out keeling over.
Yeah, it's just enough to keep you dull.
Yeah, that dullness and slight drowsiness. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it does make it difficult to catch distractions, and if you find that it's not easy to, come out of it while you're sitting, through bringing in some energy, or reflecting on some sort of inspiring theme or something like that, if you're not able to come out of it, then sometimes actually sitting isn't necessarily the best position. Maybe doing walking meditation, something that arouses more physical energy, to kind of break that drowsiness, that nodding, that subtle laxity. I like that word.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Luang Por?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked a lot in meditation circles, that say the Thai forest tradition has really put a lot of emphasis on, traditionally, is what importance of walking meditation. Of course, the Buddha himself put a lot of emphasis as well, but yeah, I think in more current times it gets overlooked, so that uh, putting attention onto the developing of walking meditation or standing meditation.
Yeah, I found that very useful, over and over again, because it's people get the idea that right concentration is
Mm,
like getting into a deep, single pointed
mm,
focus on the breathing, which you can really only do in the sitting posture. So sitting meditation is superior, because you can get more concentrated. But actually, the composure, the mind that can be, really composed in walking, and just being with the body and the gentle motion of the body, and just being with that, in its energizing form, because it does bring up a lot of energy, to just be able to walk and breathe. Um, that's sama samadhi as well.
yeah, 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 and actually, that's one of the benefits of walking meditation that the Buddha points to, that the samadhi that arises from walking meditation is very stable.
Very stable.
Yeah.
Let's see, it's 8 o'clock. I'm just gonna, I don't think we, just a quick question about is Thai society organized around the lunar calendar? Some of Thai society it is. Sometimes in the villages, like in northeast Thailand, they have the ability to kind of set their schedule around that day. But if you're in a situation where you can't do it on the lunar day, then choose a day when you can. Like if you're off on Saturdays and Sundays, and make your observance day a Saturday or a Sunday. So you have to adapt to the situation at hand the best you can. Okay, I think that probably end up calling that an evening. It's 8:01, and a few announcements maybe.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Are they?
Well, just stay tuned. We'll make an announcement later in the week about whether we're going to resume the public meetings at Yoga Samadhi. The way things are looking, and on Alms Round today, we were talking with a nurse and a local nurse, saying that lots and lots of cases, so that chances are probably pretty slim, but we'll make an announcement later.
Yeah,
we'll sort of try to gather more information and have a more clear
indication.
Yeah,
I think our stumbling point for that decision is that if we did gather, we can legally gather if we wanted to, but the prudent thing would be to require everybody to wear masks in an interior live space there, and both Luang Por and myself find it quite difficult to give a talk or answer questions with masks on, and so we're kind of trying to figure out how would we negotiate around that. I've never spent a lot of energy trying to do it, but I just know that even talking with them on,
yeah, it's hard.
It's not easy. So
yeah, it's hard. Well, yeah, part of it is you end up it's hard enough talking with people, but you're just trying to get a sense of what people are, because you're talking with a real audience.
Yeah.
So that trying to read the room is difficult. And it's there's a lot more ease if it's, say, like this with live streaming, and we can, it's very quite comfortable.
And your glasses don't fog up when
your glasses don't fog up when. Yeah.
Anyway, but we also realized that it's really beneficial to gather in person. So
people really appreciate that opportunity to gather.
So we'll be pondering this and putting an announcement on our website, and so just keep an eye on the Pacific Hermitage website for some sort of clarification towards the end of the week or on the weekend for next Tuesday. Okay, I think there's more on there, but we'll have to kind of call it an evening.
Yeah, we'll have to call it. Yeah,
and I guess that was it for announcements.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Oh, Luang Por, we had a PFOD half-day long scheduled for this Sunday the 15th, but that's the in-person gathering at Portland Friends of Dhamma is going to be also discontinued for the same reason, but Luang Por will be actually going there to do a live stream from their center.
I'll be there doing the live stream from the center, and so I'll be helping out with that, the PFOD, and
that goes from 1 to 1.
I can't remember.
Oh no, Sunday Sila, that starts in the morning sometimes, doesn't it?
In the morning. Yeah.
Go to the Portland Friends of Dhamma website if you want any more information about that.
Yeah.
Sunday the 15th.
Yeah.
Guess that's it.
Okay. Take care, everyone.